following program contains graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
Mark Fuhrman, was he a racist cop who planted evidence, or was he exploited by O.J. Simpson's defense team? One thing is for certain, he had an enormous impact on the trial of the century. I'm Michael Ayala. This is Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win?
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
None of us knew how big this would be.
I was heard on a screenplay uttering the N-word 40 times. How do you pull that back? You don't.
Have you used that word in the past 10 years?
No.
I wanted to show the jury that this man would lie.
I started feeling that maybe there was some sort of bias against Mr. Simpson. It seemed to me like he was being less than forthcoming.
You can't trust the message if you can't trust the messenger.
Once he said no, they now called him a racist and a liar.
Detective Fuhrman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I respected him. I admired him. I believed him. I was super mad, felt incredibly betrayed.
How about a couple of gloves, Detective?
Excuse me?
Did you see a couple of gloves up there?
No, I saw one glove.
The last thing anybody thought about was two young people getting slaughtered in West LA in the middle of the night. That just seemed to be forgotten entirely.
Okay, go for it, Jen.
Well, want to take one? Mark.
My wife says, she goes, why are you going to talk about the Simpson case again? And I said, well, every time I don't, somebody talks for me. And they usually don't get it right. And then you can't even, there's no rebuttal except for breaking the TV. I'm on my 38th TV. Just kidding.
The Los Angeles Police Department, a detective named Mark Fuhrman, who the defense labeled a racist cop.
I ruined certain things in my life. They decided that they were going to use those to their own benefit, for their own purpose, for their own money, for their own greed, to get a vicious, savage murderer off for no other reason than to say, we got him off because LAPD is racist.
The bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were discovered about midnight Sunday on the steps outside the condominium where Mrs. Simpson lived.
The night Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman were found stabbed to death, Mark Fuhrman wasn't on duty. But as fate would have it, he answered his boss's call when his phone rang at 1:05 in the morning.
So when I think about that, I go, why did I answer that stupid phone? Because really, when you sit and you see that there is really no life without baggage after that point, it wasn't worth it, no matter who died. You're certainly not going to bring them to life by going to the crime scene. I just did a job. O.J. Simpson left evidence like E.T. left Reese's Pieces. Everywhere he went, he left evidence. And so I just collected it up.
Initially, and at the time, I felt Mark Fuhrman was a good cop. And I thought he intuitively did some things. He seemed like a sharp detective, a new breed of detective, but a sharp detective.
I thought he was very intelligent, hardworking detective. Looked at himself as, I'm a good-looking guy, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm sort of above the others.
I was in the Marine Corps. I was in from 70 to 75. I was going to re-enlist in the Marine Corps again, and LAPD was recruiting, and it was so easy. It was an exciting career. I adapted to it very well.
Mark Fuhrman was a rising star in the eyes of the LAPD. His background was exactly what they wanted. Former Marine, very aggressive, knew his job. It made sense that somebody like this would actually show up, would be a major part of the investigation.
When I got there, you have a female face down, pool of blood, no shoes on. Her throat is cut. She's lying in a pool of blood. We couldn't see her face. Her hair is drenched with blood.
Nicole Brown Simpson was 35 years old when she was murdered at the front steps of her home. She and O.J. Simpson had recently divorced after a tumultuous 17-year relationship. Ron Goldman was 25.
The male victim is in the bushes, face up, and there has been a struggle in the bushes. There's a stocking cap that you could see, and there was one glove that was by the edge of the walkway.
Imagine if Mark Fuhrman had never picked up his phone. If he never went to Nicole's house. The defense needed a villain. And that villain was Mark Fuhrman.
Coming up next on Trial and Error, Mark Fuhrman finds another bloody glove, this time at O.J. Simpson's house.
Mark Fuhrman picked it up at the scene and brought it there.
People won't confront these charlatans about evidence because they know it's not true. Fuhrman didn't plant anything. He didn't plant the glove or anything else.
Plus, the defense labels Mark Fuhrman a racist.
And you say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a...
Some people would say, oh, Mark Fuhrman is racist.
Just hours after the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman at her house on Bundy, detectives, including Mark Fuhrman, went to O.J. Simpson's residence on Rockingham to inform him that his ex-wife was dead.
We got to the Rockingham location at about 5:15. It was still dark. We all went to the front of the house, knocked on the door, rang the bell, no answers.
While no one answered the door at the main residence, someone did answer at the guest house. Cato Kalin.
Cato Kalin's a character, and I even had to smile at the way he was actually talking to the detectives. I started asking him some questions. He goes, well, I was talking to my girlfriend, and he gave a certain time, and all of a sudden, there was this big rumbling crash on my wall, and the picture actually shook right above my head.
During that phone call, sir, did something unusual occur?
Yes.
And what was that?
I heard a thumping noise.
How many thumps did you hear?
3.
I was curious about the crash, so I went outside, kind of oriented myself. It was still dark. I looked to the left, and I saw a little picket fence that looked a little dilapidated. And then I just walk, and I see this object. And as I got closer, I shined my flashlight on it, and I could see it was clearly a glove, and it looked damp. It looked almost like somebody rubbed maple syrup on it. And I also noted that it looked very similar to the glove at Bundy.
When Cato described the thump, thump, thump on the back wall of his guest room, it was Fuhrman who went to go check it out. He intuitively did some things, particularly at Rockingham, which were the hallmark of a good cop.
Mark Fuhrman found the singular glove at O.J.'s house. Nobody else was there. He was alone. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal, but at trial, it was everything.
He goes around the side of the house, and lo and behold, he claims he finds this glove. And he says the glove is still moist and sticky. Why would it be moist and sticky? Unless he brought it over there and planted it there. This man cannot be trusted. He is central to the prosecution.
I don't know if Mark Fuhrman planted the glove. I don't know. but I think that we were able to demonstrate that there was a great deal of bias on the part of the LAPD. I have heard it said that perhaps the LAPD framed a guilty man.
The bloody glove. It's not only just outside of OJ's house, but it also has 3 people's blood on it. Nicole Brown Simpson's, Ron Goldman's, and OJ Simpson's. So this is as big a problem as you could ever have if you're OJ's defense team.
What the defense tries to convince the jurors is that Mark Fuhrman took one of the gloves from the crime scene and physically transported it to OJ's house and planted it there.
Fuhrman carried in his detective's car zipper bags, airtight, to pick up samples of evidence. It is my view that the only way in the world that the glove could have gotten from the scene of the crime to a little alley beside OJ's house where nobody ever went was if Mark Fuhrman picked it up at the scene, put it in a plastic bag, and brought it there.
Despite F. Lee Bailey's argument that originally there were 2 gloves at the crime scene and that one was transported and planted outside of OJ's home, there are no crime scene photos or any other evidence to back up that claim.
I saw a black glove.
Glove?
Yes.
The leaves of the plant kind of hung over that one glove and the ski cap?
That's correct.
Now, at this point, who was already at the location?
So myself and my partner, Officer McGowan, Officer Wally, Sergeant Kuhn was there, Sergeant Rossi, Officer Chavez and Cummings, Officer Glorioso and Ziegler, and Officer Aston, Detective Phillips, and Fuhrman arrived.
15 cops responded to that scene before Fuhrman. They only saw one glove, so now do we have a conspiracy with all these cops who don't even know each other? And Fuhrman doesn't like black people, so he planted a glove because Simpson's black. What a load of crap.
To me, because I don't believe the theories and the conspiracy theories that the defense was trying to paint, I believe in the testimony that I heard, which was that he in the attack dropped one glove at the scene and had the other one with him, and when he got back onto his property, he dropped it.
The planting of evidence, a glove at Rockingham, is absurd, and I take affront to the point where I took 2 polygraphs. The first one I took was the #1 polygrapher in the country, and he said, "You passed at the highest level I've ever seen anybody pass this polygraph." When people come up with statements like, "I framed O.J. Simpson because he was black," how would I accomplish this? Why would I accomplish this? What would it do for me? Nothing. I think it is such a disgrace that intelligent people with a doctorate in law would actually put the country and the legal system through such a charade for nothing more than their own ego to say, "I won."
Coming up next on Trial and Error, The Letter.
A woman by the name of Kathleen Bell. She reached out to the defense because she had information that they needed to hear. It was explosive.
Plus later, Mark Fuhrman takes the stand.
How about a couple of gloves, Detective?
Excuse
me?
me?
You see a couple of gloves up there?
No, I saw one glove.
I wanted to show the jury that this man would lie about something important. Didn't make any difference what it was.
Pizza's the Hut. The following program contains graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
O.J. Simpson passed away in April of 2024. Many people believe he died having gotten away with the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. A central issue in Simpson's trial was race, and for the defense, that was personified by Detective Mark Fuhrman.
Some people would say Mark Fuhrman is racist. What would you say to that person?
I always think of my obituary. The disgraced ex-cop who testified about not using the racial epithet in the Simpson case. That's the first sentence. If you want to make blanket statements absent of knowing any facts, absent of knowing any of the situation that happened during the case or just exactly how Simpson was treated, and you want to call me a racist, I really don't care.
State and spell your name for the record.
Mark Fuhrman, M-A-R-K, F-U-H-R-M-A-N.
3 weeks after the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, Mark Fuhrman testified at O.J.'s preliminary hearing, which was televised.
Can you describe the glove?
I noticed that it was a dark brown, or could have been even a black at the light that I was looking at it.
I walked in to my house, and on Channel 7, I will never forget this. My wife was sitting watching the TV, and I looked, and Johnny Cochran goes, "Where'd they get this Fuhrman? Central Casting?" And I go, and I looked, I'm totally screwed. They've got to get rid of me. Because it really didn't matter what happened or how they got rid of me. Dead prostitute in my locker, pound of cocaine in my trunk, get hit by a truck. I don't know. It was going to happen, and I kind of knew it. I was on borrowed time no matter what.
During this preliminary hearing, Mark Fuhrman was one of the stars. A woman by the name of Kathleen Bell, who was watching the hearing on TV, she reached out to the defense because she had information that they needed to hear. It was explosive. It changed everything.
Kathleen Bell, an old acquaintance of Mark Fuhrman, writes a letter to the defense. In that letter, she details conversations she had with Mark Fuhrman where he was calling black people the N-word. He said anytime he saw a black guy with a white woman, he would pull them over, never mind probable cause. And he actually said that he wanted all the N-words gathered together and killed.
The defense calls Kathleen Bell.
At trial, the defense called Kathleen Bell to the witness stand, and they had her share the despicable things that she claims Mark Fuhrman said to her. Everything that she said in that letter, she then shared with the jury. It was F. Lee Bailey who did the examination, and he did a great job painting the picture that Mark Fuhrman is a racist.
He said if I had my way, I'd gather, all would be gathered together and burned.
And what was your reaction when he told you that he would gather the all together and burn them?
I'm sorry. I thought that was, nobody ever said that to me before. I heard the N-word before, but nobody ever said something like that to me before.
Mark Fuhrman denied ever knowing Kathleen Bell. He denied ever having a conversation with Kathleen Bell. But the allegations were out there, and he was put in a position where there was really nothing he could say or do to counteract what the defense was portraying.
The prosecution, they blew it. They should never have used Mark Fuhrman, because I can't believe that they didn't know that about him. Like, if you're a good prosecutor, a good lawyer, that's something you should know. You have to vet somebody, particularly when the stakes are high, particularly amidst all of the racial tension that was happening in LA at that time period.
At the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, Los Angeles was still recovering from the 1992 riots, which erupted after the acquittal of 4 LAPD officers for the beating of Rodney King.
Those white officers were acquitted, and you had people rightfully upset. They're going, this is crazy. The LAPD is racist. You can see it right there on the tape. This happens to us all the time, us being African Americans.
The LAPD had bad cops. They did. We could talk about Rodney King, but it was way beyond Rodney King. And people in certain communities lived with this. They knew about this. This was their own experience.
We don't want our law enforcement officers to look like they are biased and maybe racist, and they treat certain people a certain way. But they do. It's human nature. The only time you interact with black people is when you come to do your job and you have been programmed that these are bad people and you need to do what you need to do to take care of it. And if that means some head knocking and violating the law you're supposed to to carry out. If nobody's watching, that's what you do.
It was about the LA riots, some of the most deadly riots in this city's in this nation's history. Nobody in that jury liked these cops.
You can't trust the message if you can't trust the messenger. And we proved that there was a rush to judgment, that the messengers were the LAPD, that all of this damning evidence is being brought to you by them. They have demonstrated that they are not necessarily to be believed.
And if you can't trust the messenger, then you can't trust the message. That is really good. That I wonder how long it took them to figure that one out. Prove that I'm an incompetent detective, so that I don't know how to do my job. Then you may have an argument. I want you to tell me and show me where race was inserted into this investigation, arrest, or trial, other than by you.
Straight ahead on Trial and Error, the tapes.
Well, the Laura Hart McKinney tapes, that was certainly a surprise to us.
But first, F. Lee Bailey's cross-examination of Detective Mark Fuhrman.
Do you use the word in describing people?
No, sir.
I thought about one thing when I was sitting there, and I go, you dumb son of a bitch. You should have never done a good job. You should have never answered that phone.
The way that F. Lee Bailey was setting him up just seems like such a classic trap.
You hit her. She's got marks. You're a batterer.
This is a murder case. They felt it had nothing to do with the murders.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? New episode next Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific, only on Court TV.
Good morning again, Detective. You're reminded you were still under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Bailey, you may commence with your cross-examination.
Good morning, Detective Fuhrman.
Good morning, Mr. Bailey.
Prosecutors put Mark Fuhrman on the stand to testify about finding the glove on O.J.'s estate. But it was F. Lee Bailey's cross-examination that had the whole country watching. Bailey had one goal: to catch Fuhrman in a lie.
When you were discharged from the Marine Corps, what did you next do?
I entered the academy on August 4th, 1975.
Then you had planned to become a police officer before you were actually discharged, is that correct?
Yes.
The way F. Lee Bailey crossed Mark Fuhrman was not just textbook, it was genius. Because he was able to get things that he wasn't even sure he could use until afterward. It really boxed in Fuhrman in such a way that it's not just what he did, it's everything that he touches afterward becomes suspect. Everything that the LAPD touches afterward, because of Mark Fuhrman, becomes suspect.
F. Lee Bailey could have taught a master class on cross-examination with what he did to Fuhrman in those moments. Because what he did was he got him to deny using those racial slurs. He got the denial in front of the jury when he knew behind the scenes he had the ammunition to refute it.
Did you say that when you see a driving with a white woman, you pull them over?
No.
Did you say that you'd like nothing more than to see all gathered together and killed?
No.
I wanted to show the jury that this man would lie about something important. Did make a difference what it was, because there is a technique in the trial of cases where you get someone to lie about A when B is the central issue, and you tell the jury falsus in unum, falsus in omnibus, which means if you lie about one thing, you probably lie about everything.
F. Lee Bailey was very effective. I think he used a Marine to Marine type of, I think he said, let me talk to you Marine to Marine, because F. Lee Bailey was in the service, and he had this booming voice, and he would talk, he would pontificate, and he'd use these gigantic words, but you know, he had a great flair.
You say you're sure you never met a woman named Kathleen Bell?
Yes, sir.
Now, Detective Fuhrman, are you as satisfied with the quality of the truth of your denial of knowing Kathleen Bell as you are of your claim that you found the right-handed glove on Mr. Simpson's property?
I don't understand any of that.
You don't understand that question?
No.
About a couple of gloves, Detective.
Excuse
me?
me?
Did you see a couple of gloves up there?
No, I saw one glove.
I started feeling that maybe there was some sort of bias against Mr. Simpson that Mr. Fuhrman had on his part, and it seemed to me like he was being less than forthcoming.
Do you use the word in describing people?
No, sir.
Have you used that word in the past 10 years?
Not that I recall, no.
And you say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
He asked me, have you ever used or called anybody? It was a compound question.
You didn't say, yes, I've said it, because of the compound nature of the question?
No, I mean, that would be an easy way. My mind is pretty analytical, and I'm clicking off technicalities in my head all the time. And that would be easy to say, and I think it participated, but I just wasn't willing to go down the road.
F. Bailey's cross-examination of Mark Fuhrman was very dramatic. It was kind of like out of a movie. We knew that it was pivotal. Like the way that F. Bailey was setting him up, like such a classic trap. And it was almost hard to believe, like, is he really just gonna walk into this trap like that? But he did.
Were you surprised that the prosecution called Mark Fuhrman to testify?
Shocked, absolutely shocked. We were all hoping for it, and it was a terrible, terrible mistake. They could easily have done without calling him, but he was our ace in the hole, and he was very good from a point of view of the defense. Bailey's cross was excellent because the goal was to get him to lie.
When I was on the stand, I think many people don't understand how lonely it was sitting up there knowing what was about to come and knowing full well that Marcia Clark was not going to fight. I could really see it on her face.
If you called someone a nigger, you have forgotten it?
I'm not sure I can answer that question the way you phrased it, sir.
When Bailey used the N-word during his cross-examination, it became very impactful to me that Mr. Fuhrman had biases that definitely were being brought to light.
I hated to use that word, but on the other hand, to undercut it, to soften it, instead of hurling it directly in Fuhrman's face, I think would have been a mistake.
It didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter. But I was mad and I was stubborn. You couldn't see it on my face. I looked calm and collected and everything. But, I was put in a position that many say I deserved. And to me, I thought about one thing when I was sitting there, and I go, you dumb son of a bitch. You should have never done a good job. You should have never answered that phone.
So that anyone who comes to this court and quotes you as using that word in dealing with African Americans would be a liar, would they not, Detective Fuhrman?
Yes, they would.
I looked at him incredulously and I said, all of them? Which tipped him to the fact I had an army outside the courtroom door. And the mistake he made was, yes, all of them.
All of them, correct?
All of them.
It doesn't matter if you say never. I never use that word. What does it matter? The jury is now, they're deaf. They are going to hear what they believe. They're going to make up their own answer, and then you subvert justice.
I think Mark Fuhrman is fully human. However, I think when you lie to the extent that he did, and that he kind of stood on what he had said, it's very easy to believe that he planted evidence. I don't know whether he did or not, but I wouldn't put it past him.
Looking at Mark Fuhrman, at what he had done as an officer, what he'd been involved with, I knew he didn't use the word. You can bring him in court all day long and say, he wouldn't use that word, he didn't do that, that's not the way he talked, that's not the way he feel. Come on. You're playing to the jury and you're playing to America.
I think Mark's biggest mistake was that when he was asked if he ever used the N-word, I think he probably would have been better off saying, you know what, I'm involved in a lot of horrible things and I might have been angry at some point and may have used the word. But I think once he said no, They now called him a racist and a liar. Terrible combination.
If he had said, yeah, of course I've said that. Am I ashamed of it? Sure. I was stupid, whatever he could have said. But he said, no, I've never used that word in my life. And nobody believed him. And the second that they didn't believe him on that issue, then there's a question, gee, if he's a racist, do you think he planted the evidence? The second that issue came into this case, the case was, in a sense, lost.
Up next on Trial and Error, more ammunition to use against Mark Fuhrman.
Those tapes turned the case on its head. They were in the bathtub before they found out the water was too hot.
The Fuhrman tapes were really pretty awful.
After Mark Fuhrman denied ever using the N-word, O.J. Simpson's defense team uncovered irrefutable recorded evidence of him using the word more than 40 times. A filmmaker named Laura Hart McKinney had recorded interviews with Fuhrman for a screenplay and turned them over to the defense.
Teresa. I just practice my kicks.
The Fuhrman tapes were really pretty awful. It was really, really hard to listen to. It was some really disgusting language. The way that he talked about suspects, the way that he talked about minorities, the way that he talked about black people was deeply disturbing and offensive.
I was heard on a screenplay uttering the N-word 40 times. How do you pull that back? You don't. Do you apologize for it? I think that's contrite, and I think it's a little embarrassing.
The defense has these audio tapes of Fuhrman bragging about police brutality and using the N-word more than 40 times, and really expressing his disdain and hate of minorities. Of course, the defense wants to use every part of that audio tape, but Judge Ito only allows 2 instances.
We were furious when Judge Ito, because there were all of these instances, and we were standing by the fax machine waiting for the ruling to come in as to how many of these instances Judge Ito was going to allow us to use in the trial. He only allowed 2, and he allowed the most benign of them.
During the 41 or 42 times that Mr. Fuhrman used the word, could you tell us how he appeared as he did that?
When Officer Fuhrman used the word, it was in a very casual, ordinary pattern of speech.
Growing up and hearing the word, it was one thing, but to realize that it was so out front that this guy who claimed at first that he had never used the word before, and then of course they came up with the recordings about him using it and all, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe that they actually put this guy on the stand, and he played a very prominent role in the investigation itself. And so to know that he had a certain prejudice or bias against the defendant right at that point, it just didn't bode well with me.
Those tapes turned the case on its head. If the prosecution had known about them, they never would have indicted O.J. Unfortunately, they were in the bathtub before they found out the water was too hot.
We had no idea of the existence of those tapes or Fuhrman's interaction with Laura Hart McKinney at all as we proceeded through trial, and until it was revealed to all of us. That was certainly a surprise to us.
I was on the department a long time. I saw a lot. I heard a lot. I heard a lot of stories. There's a lot of folklore. There's a lot of stories that take on their own life as they go down from person to person. A lot of that was like that. Some of it was imagination, but as far as, and some of it was real.
The defense has the tapes, but it has something else. It has other witnesses who heard Fuhrman saying racist things.
Is it fair to say that the description of the way the N people were treated, according to Fuhrman, was abusive?
Absolutely. He said, oh, well, it really relieves your tension. And then this nauseating, it hits you here kind of laugh.
What did he say?
He said, the only good is a dead.
Were you taken into custody by Mr. Fuhrman?
Yes, sir. Officer Fuhrman turned around, looked at me, and told me, I told you we'd get you.
Can you describe for us the tone of voice that he used?
Anger, hatred.
I've started believing that possibly Mr. Fuhrman planted the 2 gloves and the cat at the 2 different locations. And I only came to that conclusion after the fact that it came up that he had biases towards blacks in the past.
Simpson's attorneys now have proof, undeniable proof, that Fuhrman lied when he denied using the N-word ever. Now they want to bring him back to impeach him.
The defense team really wanted to bring Mark Fuhrman back. They wanted to call him as a witness in their case. But what Mark Fuhrman did was he asserted his Fifth Amendment privilege, and the judge allowed him to do that outside of the presence of the jury.
Detective Fuhrman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Is it your intention to assert your Fifth Amendment privilege with respect to all questions that I ask you?
Yes.
Mark Fuhrman pleading the Fifth may have actually helped the defense team. If Mark Fuhrman would have gotten up there, here's what he could have done. He could have said, yes, I said those despicable things. And you know I said them because you have proof of it. But I did not plant evidence. He missed an opportunity for that important denial. The jury never heard it.
When Mark Fuhrman took the Fifth over the N-word and the tapes, I was super mad, felt incredibly betrayed. I had defended him, backed him up. I respected him. I admired him. I believed him, and I still do. But taking the Fifth, I think, just negated everything before. Just own it. Be a man and own it. Taking the Fifth completely tarnished every single piece of evidence that he touched, every note that he had taken, anywhere that he was involved in that crime scene and that investigation was tarnished because he took the Fifth.
From what I saw, he never behaved like a racist around me or the other officers of color. Never did. Never did. So I'm not excusing what he'd said or did. Maybe that was just Mark trying to impress that writer.
He not only made himself look bad, he made the police department look bad. He made all law enforcement look bad. It was an embarrassment to testify in open court in front of 50 million people or more on live television when asked if you've ever planted evidence in this case or any other and plead the Fifth. You say, hell no, I didn't plant evidence. Who in the hell do you think you are telling me that?
Marcia Clark was in an impossible situation. One of the foundations of her case is the evidence that Mark Fuhrman presents. So in her closing arguments, Marcia Clark has to walk this very fine line. She's trying to thread the needle between saying, believe the evidence that Mark Fuhrman presented, even though you hate Mark Fuhrman and don't believe anything Mark Fuhrman says.
Should such a person be a police officer? No. In fact, do we wish there were no such person on the planet? Yes. But the fact that Mark Fuhrman is a racist and lied about it on the witness stand does not mean that we haven't proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Both sides address Mark Fuhrman's racism in their closing statements. What more of a gift did Mark Fuhrman give to the defense. He was the nail in the prosecution's case. The defense went so far as to compare Mark Fuhrman to Adolf Hitler.
There was another man not too long ago in the world who had those same views. This man, this scourge, became one of the worst people in the history of this world, Adolf Hitler, because people didn't care, didn't try to stop him. He had the power over his racism.
How do you compare Fuhrman, who you've said was a liar and a racist, to someone responsible for the death of millions of people? You couldn't help but thinking every day how much of this is being understood or recognized by the jury. For me, it was always came back to, no, they'll see the truth. The truth is there, it's obvious. They're not going to be swayed by all the BS. But that's exactly what they were swayed by.
The defendant, having been acquitted of both charges, he is ordered transported to an appropriate sheriff's facility and released.
I was really disheartened that in this country that we had a justice system that decided that the false accusation of a detective planning evidence, the accusation that he was racist, whether he was or he wasn't, would come in, and we're going to absolutely forget about two victims. Their families, the lives they could have had, all the pain that created. We're just going to forget about that just to win.
O.J. Simpson was acquitted on October 3rd, 1995, and Mark Fuhrman immediately resigned from the Los Angeles Police Department. He was a disgraced cop and a pariah in the eyes of many, and would never be a police officer again.
Mark Fuhrman wound up being charged with perjury for lying on the witness stand about using racial slurs. He wound up pleading no contest, and the judge gave him 3 years probation and a $200 fine.
So this is what I will be remembered for. So be it. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't apologize for being a good detective that day. I won't lower myself to grovel about if I'm a racist or I'm not. I live with my own mistakes. Hindsight's 20/20. It's either that or I should have never been born, one or the other.
That's touching. So you're okay, though? You're okay after all that?
No.
No.
I'll never be okay.
How do you do that? How do you cope with that?
A serial killer that I researched for a show was asked that on being on life without the possibility of parole for like 700 years. He says, how do you deal with that? You put one foot in front of the other.
Whether or not the role of Mark Fuhrman single-handedly lost the case for the state is up for debate. However, there were plenty of other issues that plagued prosecutors during the trial. I'm Michael Ayala. Thanks for watching this episode of Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win?
Two people viciously attacked, numerous stab wounds.
He's a killer. That's what he is. He's not my friend.